Amen. If you have a copy of God's word, turn with me to Ruth chapter 3. Ruth chapter 3, that's where we're going to be at today. We are continuing a sermon series in the book of Ruth, and by God's grace, we've been encouraged through God's word thus far together, and hopefully this morning will be another morning where his word serves us well as his people. If you would, if you're able to remain standing with me in this time. Here is what the word of the Lord says. It reads as this: Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lays. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." And she replied, "All that you say, I will do." Verse 6, so she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down and at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. And at midnight the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." And he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And it is true that I am a redeemer. Yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then, as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning." So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize her. And he said, "Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." And he said, "Bring the garment you are wearing and hold it out." So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley, and he put it on her. And then she went into the city, and when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, "How did you fare, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "These 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, 'You must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law.'" And she replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but he will settle the matter today." Praise be to God for the reading of his word. You guys can go ahead and have a seat. This morning I want to preach on the phrase, this idea, the threshing floor of redemption, the threshing floor of redemption. Currently, my kids love playing in the living room. We have a little setup for them, if you've been to our house, where we have toys that are accessible to them in some cabinets that are right there. And at the beginning of the day, our living room looks so clean. It's so nice. We even get it all vacuumed up. No toys everywhere. But as the day goes on, the blocks come out. The cars come out. They start playing with one toy, start playing with another toy, without putting the other one back. And so at the end of the day, sometimes you look and you're like, this is sheer chaos. I mean, it's not just that they need one ball to come out, they need every ball to come out. And so you can just imagine that, and many of y'all have had that experience before, and so you understand what I'm saying, or you've seen it happen. Yet their ability to imagine and to play forms them. The memories that they made in those moments of being able to build things that they might still just knock down, or the moments they were playing with the ball, is something that will shape them. They will think back on those moments. And the carnage, the wreckage of those moments feels like the threshing floor we're going to talk about, where to make something beautiful, there's going to be some things that are discarded. There's going to be some things that are going to be laying everywhere. But there's a beautiful process that happened. In the moments that you might not see at the end of the day, there's those joyful moments where 2 siblings are getting along perfectly. They're the moments where they say, "Hey, look, Mom or Dad, I made this house," and they're proud of it. Something happens in that process. Beauty came from the chaos and the process. So at the end of the day, hopefully, joyfully, you clean it back up. And you can rest satisfied because you know what happened that day. See, once Ruth had returned after a successful first day of gleaning at Boaz's field, and if we remember, her life was still fairly chaotic, and a lot of things had happened in her life. She had been blessed. He had provided for her, and if you want to catch up, we talked about this the past 2 weeks, a little bit of the backstory here for Ruth and for Naomi and her family, but she was not well-to-do. She was in need of much, but this moment came where she had went and had been provided for. She comes back, and Naomi is saying, hey, I want to send you back out. I'm encouraging you to go. And then sometimes it takes those small blessings for us to feel reinvigorated, to go out and keep trusting God in faith. And it seems like even in this moment for Naomi, a light bulb went off. Okay, so Boaz was so kind to you in this way. He thought fondly of you. Well, you need something in your life that I can't actually provide you. Maybe he could be a part of that solution. And it's in this moment that Naomi stopped thinking about herself and thought about the possibilities for Ruth's life. Here's her words. She says, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you that it may be well with you? Remember, Naomi's been basking in her situation. She's been frustrated. She's been hurt. But now she's thinking about Ruth's life and where that could go. So she understands it hasn't been the best life. And that Ruth wasn't able to rest assured for her future, and that Naomi could not secure that for her. So this is the moment where you see some language shift. The actions from Naomi tend to look more like she's her own child and how she's seeking to care for her. And any good parent wants to see their child have good opportunities and security in life. Like, that's a hope. Like, if you don't feel that way, you're in a bad spot, just to let you know. But like, you should feel that way. It's good and natural. And so it's good for Naomi to think outside of her situation and to now to see that, hey, I want to see Ruth succeed, her legacy to go on, even if it impacts my situation. Sometimes it's hard to cheer for people when your life hasn't been going well. So this is a moment where Naomi is understanding that she needs to look outside of herself and to trust God in faith, that he has something for her as well. And in the language of the text, as it's describing this idea that she should seek after rest and that it will be well with her, has the connotation of security, long life, and even bridal happiness. That will make sense for us a little bit later. Those are very common factors that could lead to a restful life in this time period for a woman of Ruth's season of life. Ultimately, she wanted her to find home. She wanted her to be able to rest well. So Naomi looks at Boaz as actually the nearest relative that can serve as a redeemer. And we're going to see this idea kind of tilled out in this text, but the entire story, the narrator's been setting this up. There's a relative here. There's a relative here, right? And so it's coming to this moment where Naomi understands that it's not out of no reason that Boaz took interest in Ruth. God's working something out. And then she's like, okay, well, this relative might be the Redeemer. And it's so interesting in this text because this whole idea of Ruth finding this hope, finding this relationship, finding home, it makes their story really interesting. Because if you remember, there's a time when Naomi wanted nothing really to do with Ruth in the season. She loved her, appreciated her, but what did she tell her to do? Go home to your family. But it's interesting here because she told her to go home, but now Ruth will be able to make a new home for Naomi too. I mean, it's different. This is how God works sometimes. Even better, Ruth ended up serving as a mediator in the process to bring in about this family that Naomi had longed for, that she thought was taken away from her. But God was restoring her to this family that she had desired. But she did not imagine it would come through Ruth and the lineage of her womb also. So Naomi knew where Boaz was at, where he would be at that evening, and she urged Ruth to go and to meet him on the threshing floor. So here's what the threshing floor is. After the harvest, the fresh grain was carried from the field to the threshing floor, where the grain would be beaten in a toothed sledge and trampled under maybe an animal's hooves just to create the right amount of substance that could be used for different purposes, right? And so what they would try to do is they would try to remove the husk and from the kernels, and they would try to create the most optimal barley or the most optimal grain for everyone. And what they would do is they would take off different parts of the harvest and give it to different elements for mutual benefits, okay? And so it might have been, okay, this is for the animals, this is for our living here. Like they were separating it all out. But then after they would go and start winnowing to separate the kernels from the husk and the chaff and the stalks, an individual would toss the wheat mixture into the breeze. And so it always had to happen downhill to some degree because you wanted a constant breeze. And with the light wind, the shafts would blow away and the rest was sifted through for the various purposes. And so you would know after a great harvest, they would be at the threshing floor in some way. And it was a mess because you have husks going somewhere, stalks going one way, and they're just trying to take the best that they could from the grain. So she knew this was happening. And so for these winnowers, they were there looking for the precise when, and so it must have been that type of day in their community that they knew that it would be that night. But how does she know that Boaz would be involved? Also, this shows the type of leader he is. He wasn't just allowing everybody else to do the dirty work. He showed up to do the dirty work, right? Because he's known as being an upworthy individual. And Naomi knew that he would be there. And this process would be one where they wouldn't sleep in their homes. They would even sleep at the threshing floor with the grain at their feet. So either way, Naomi was aware that he would be staying there that evening, and she saw it as an opportunity for Ruth to respond to the kindness of Boaz. Knowing that Boaz was a redeemer in the family's line helped her to understand why God might be orchestrating their stories together. See, Naomi is hopeful that Boaz, as an upright and worthy man, would respond to the request to have a redeemer. And it was very common in this time period for relatives of a man who passed away to step up and to take care of other relatives and to be the redeemer of their family situation so they're not alone. Particularly if there was someone who was single as well and they could step up, they would come into the conversation. So this is why, as you read this book, Boaz is commonly referred to as a kinsman redeemer. He's kinfolk, not too close kinfolk. He's kinfolk. He's a redeemer. But in verse 3, Naomi begins to give some advice to Ruth about how she would make herself known to Boaz. If I could just pause for a moment, this is very interesting and humbling here because it wasn't like Ruth kind of asked Naomi, but Naomi started telling Ruth some of this advice. And I just want to say it's really actually helpful to seek after advice and counsel from people in relationships. But this is one of those moments where like, your family member, they're going to tell you anyways what their thoughts are. And so they telling you, some of y'all got those people in y'all's lives, y'all know. Naomi gives Ruth some wise counsel that will hopefully work out for her benefit in the ongoing situation. But she knew that there had to be a preparation process there. And so I just want to say it's wise that people speak in. And this is a moment where Ruth doesn't run away when wisdom is being shared. She actually presses in and she listens to the word. She wasn't like, I don't got time for this right now. Mother-in-law, you just nagging me. She listens and then says, I'll do all that what you say. And so there's a respect there for the next generation, so for the generation that went before her, and heeding advice and in heeding wisdom. Here's what she tells her. First, wash yourself. Isn't that common sense, you think? And then I remember society today, and many people don't wash themselves. And so, that are able to as well. You should wash yourself. It's a good, clean, healthy habit. Just saying that. Help us all out that way. But this is real, though. This is real. She's sitting him down in the moment, and she's saying, look, like for this to work out, you need to present yourself in a good way. Fellas, some of y'all know, y'all had somebody tell you in life that you need to clean some stuff up before you got into a situation. Like, hey, man, you should probably get a haircut before you go talk to her because you haven't cut in a while. You probably should shave a little bit. Make sure you shower after work before you go on that date. Like, this is one of those types of moments where she's like, hey, you make sure you wash because it'll be helpful. This is that real advice some of us need in life. It's practical, and you think it's assumed, but it's not always. She keeps on going, though. Second, she tells Ruth to anoint herself. What she's saying here is that she's telling her to bring out some scented oils and perfumes, a part of the process to make herself presentable and desirable. This is not to take over for her natural beauty. The text assumes in many ways that Ruth is naturally a beautiful woman, but she's saying it's okay to prepare yourself for the moment of opportunity here. It's all right to get nice and to go out. Fellas, take your wives out on a nice date. Let her dress up and enjoy it. That's for free too. Change everything. So Naomi is telling her to bring out these scents. In the manner in which she's using this language, it's not to present a seductive type of manner, but she is challenging Ruth to present herself as someone who wants to be married. She's preparing her to be a bride. And that's a process on both sides. If you went through that journey or you're going through that journey, it's a process as you prepare yourself to be courted or you prepare yourself to be a pursuer in that relationship. It's good to listen to wisdom of people who've been there before and walked through it and who have been successful in getting there. And so there's even much that can be learned even from my single brothers and sisters today of even how we can present ourselves in moments for us who want to be married or even to find people who are marriable in general. This goes both ways because Naomi desired that Ruth would have a chance at an upright and honorable man, as the narrative states. Therefore, Ruth needs to present herself in a manner that Boaz would take notice of her. In other words, if you want the person that you want to be with, but you're not moving in the same direction, it's sometimes kind of hard to get that type of person. Some of us are just immensely blessed. You're like, I'm always out of my league. But in reality, though, most of the time, unless it's a divine work of God, you probably should present yourself rightly. And so what's happening here is that Naomi is preparing her for this moment because the story is setting in. And it wasn't always just about the event, but what is about to happen too. One of my favorite movies is the movie called Hitch. And before you understand Naomi, you need to see her as a Hitchens type of figure. If you have seen this movie. In the movie, Alex Hitchens is working with a client and a friend by the name of Albert Brenneman. And if you remember this scene in the movie, Hitch's goal is he wants to help these men get the woman of their dreams, and he's trying to help teach him a few things that might be helpful, things not to do or things to do. And one of my favorite moments within the movie is that he was going to go out, and it was going out to this party, and Hitch looks at him and says, Albert, do you like to dance? And he's like, yeah, I like to dance. And he's like going in, like he's showing him all of his moves. And like, I mean, he even does he's like, oh yeah, this is the Q-tip. Like he's going in his ears, like he's doing his Q-tip thing. He's like, oh yeah, then you throw it away. Then you throw it away. And so he's having this moment. And Will Smith, who's playing Hitch, is like looking at him like, what are you doing? Like, do not go on the dance floor with her and do that. Like, do not be yourself. That's one of the best ministries somebody can give you. Sometimes you need to hear, don't be yourself in this moment, right? And so this is a moment where he's looking at him. He's like, look, for you in dancing, I know you like to dance, you like to enjoy it. Your space is right here. You just need to stay within it. You need to be able to keep your beat. He's like, none of this, none of that. Stay in your lane. This is one of those moments where Naomi's like, look, Ruth, I love you, sister. But here's some space you can walk in. There's wisdom in that when you heed that from people. And so it's just one of those types of moments. So even though Ruth had been in the courting process before, hear that. Not just because you've done it before doesn't mean you've had it all figured out. How humbling is that, right? That someone who had been there before is like, I've done this. But she still even listens to wisdom in counsel. She took advice. Naomi says, do not run down to the threshing floor and make yourself known to him. Don't be too fast, so if you don't just run to him and start talking to him, like, hey, I'm here. You've missed me. I've been here the entire time. But she gives wisdom, says, okay, let him finish his meal. Let him enjoy it. Let him enjoy the time with his friends. And then wait. Be patient. Allow him to be in the right type of situation. Because at that time, Boaz had worked a long day. He would be in the right frame of mind and away from his workers and his gleaners, which for her in the story meant that he would be tired and he'd be ready to go to sleep. And so he's going to sleep. And everybody is actually in the same room. Like many people would sleep in the same room. And so Ruth decides to do everything that her mother-in-law had gave for her to do. So after Boaz had eaten and drunk his drink, and his heart was merry, Ruth went and laid down at the end of the heap of grain. And then the text describes what she did. And she uncovered his feet and laid it at the bottom of the bed. And this is key because for some of y'all scandalous people be insinuating stuff with this text. This text isn't insinuating what some people try to imply it insinuates. It says she lay down at the foot of the bed, not in it. Just want to be clear there. She's an upright, worthy woman. That's what it says at the end. Again, Naomi's not setting her up for a seductive act here. And so she's laying at the foot of the bed, and that's why she tells her to uncover his feet. Some of y'all, hopefully, I don't know everybody's sleeping habits, but many people cover their feet while they sleep. But it will be evident from where he was at, where the wind would blow, with the blanket not being on his feet, that he would feel the air hitting his feet, right? And that would startle him. Some of y'all have like blanket wars with your spouse or something like that, and so y'all like pulling the blanket back and forth. Some of y'all like get your own blanket because y'all went through it too many years, so it hurt your marriage. And so this is one of those moments where it's like, okay, his feet are now exposed, and it would startle him and wake him up. So what does Boaz say? He says, who are you? He's not like, oh, come on in. Who are you at the foot of my bed right now? Like any reasonable person, Ruth responds in a healthy way. I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. Could you imagine hearing that? Like, what? Spread your wings over me, like, because you're a redeemer? But her words cannot be applied in sometimes the seductive applications of the text, but it shows that she is wanting Boaz to be her husband, to take her in, to become the redeemer of their familial story. Ruth is treating him like an honorable man, And she's saying she wants long-term relationship with him. And then here's the good news about Boaz. Honorable men reject fast relationships. That's all I'm going to say because we got little ones in the room. But they reject that. Honorable men do that. They don't want a hand in that. And he does not go into that by any means. But he begins to engage. He doesn't even see her in that light. She understands that. Boaz entertained the inquiry from Ruth because he had seen her story. And it's so interesting because you got to be pretty bold to do this because based on the context, they weren't the only ones in the room. I mean, imagine like a camp type of scene, right? Got a bunch of biz lined up, a grain at the bottom. You got one gleaner over there, one worker over there. And she comes in to propose to him in this moment. And so this is why they're trying to be stealth about it. Because in the same way, this is the only time that she could get with this leader because he was so busy, he was so popular. This is why she came in this moment. She wasn't trying to wake everybody else. She wasn't trying to make a commotion at all. She was seeking to have a personal moment with him. See, Ruth's purpose is to be his bride, and that's what the spreading your wings over your servant is trying to tell us. And the same language is used in Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 8, in a similar type of manner. And so you could only understand that Boaz might be caught off guard by the words at first, but then he began to understand what Ruth was doing. And he responds to her. He says, I'll do all that you ask. Like, he had gotten to know her previously. He learned about her. He even says later on that the whole city says that she is a good woman. So he's grateful to be the kinsman redeemer. He had no sense of obligation to their family, but he took it on. See, Naomi expected Boaz to take the situation from there, and that's why she didn't kind of finish the plan. She says, hey, wherever you want to go from here, like, trust him, he'll lead you from there. Because she knew the type of man that he was and how he would lead them to the end result. Here's another thing that Boaz notices about Ruth. He realizes that she isn't looking for a get-rich-quickly scheme either. She wasn't looking at the 401k, trying to find out how much money he made. Like, he got a good job. No? Go ahead, talk to his brother. She didn't go for the younger men that would be there longer with her, possibly. She went solely after him. And let's be real for story here. I mean, that could be tempting, potentially. I mean, she wasn't well off. But Boaz even assumes that she's attractive enough for other men to want to pursue her, that she was pushing them off. She was waiting. She's being faithful. And sometimes you go through seasons of waiting longer than you want to. But as a worthy woman, the Lord set her up and prepared her for this moment. A moment where her reputation would precede her in the city. Because people knew her stature, they knew her nature, who she was, that she was faithful, that she was humble. She didn't boast in what she brought to the table, but her worth was evident to others. And brothers and sisters, today, there's some of us who even want to be known as worthy. Yet they believe that you might need to make a name for yourself. Maybe you felt that way in life, that you felt you have to make your name known. Ruth isn't taking that perspective. She isn't going through life with that type of understanding, but she's just seeking to be humble. And God provided for her. The same truths that are evident for you are evident for Ruth too, that she's made in the image of God, that she has this value and this dignity and worth. But her worthiness that the city saw was based on her actions. But then we have another element of the story. Boaz accepting this marriage proposal was even countercultural for the environment that he was in. She was probably wondering, would a man like Boaz want her? I mean, she was from a different cultural background, a different skin complexion, a different economic class. But the only comment that he could make was about the integrity of her personhood. That says a lot about who he is. He was honorable, and he saw her as worthy. He doesn't want her to fear about how this might look, but he makes her secure for the future. He even goes outside of his way to make sure that she doesn't even look like anything negative or bad or unrighteous had happened. He sets her off on the right foot. So as he's explaining all this to her, he looks to her and he says, well, actually, there's a redeemer that's nearer than I. There's a closer relative. And in the rightful way, we need to give that family an opportunity to bring you in. And this shows that he wasn't just trying to do something quickly, but he's trying to be wise, understanding, and take the right steps. So Ruth waits with Boaz. She trusts him in this process. And we're going to see how that ends next week. But it's that step of faith. And he knew that she could handle this because she was a woman of strength. See, how did they get to this moment? It's the threshing floor of redemption. It's the moment in their life where Ruth had been tired of going through probably, and life had felt chaotic. There was a process where the wheat had to be separated from the chaff, from the stalks, and it was a very intentional, meaningful process that led to an impact in their lives. That she had felt the weight of that. But even in the midst of those moments, God was still working something out on the threshing floor. It might have felt like a mess. It might have felt like she had to pursue conversations, pursue relationships with other people, but God was still redeeming something. But God had brought her and Boaz together. Boaz was without a child. He was without an heir. Ruth was without a husband and an offspring to continue the family name. God had brought her to this area where Boaz was at, and he received her kindly. God used the process of sifting like the wheat to form both of their experiences of redemption. And maybe you're even going through a sifting process right now in your life where there's things being pulled out to purify, to put you in a season and to put you in a space, and it's messy. Maybe you feel like you've been on the threshing floor for a long time, and you feel like you keep leaving with nothing. But God is working something out. You feel like you keep getting blown to and fro with the wind, but God is working something out. This is where we trust God in faith. That through this process, even though there's ups and downs, He's still working something out good. And you might see little signs along the way, but the culmination of this work of God in the life of Ruth and Naomi and Boaz is culminating here in one of the most unlikely places that you would imagine. So how did y'all get engaged? Well, we were on the threshing floor, like laying on some wheat. That don't sell, right? That don't sell. But you don't know the process that you're going through and how God is working out a story of redemption in your life. Friends, I don't know where you're at today. But Ruth came to the threshing floor seeking redemption. See, that process takes time, and our experience of redemption will take time. But are you willing to go through a similar process? Will you keep trusting God in faith, taking those steps? Will you listen to wise counsel? Will you not just listen to them, but will you ask them to speak into your life? As your family makes decisions, as you make decisions in your work, as you move forward? Will we trust ourselves to God and to other people that they will look after us? Are we willing to go through the refining? That separation process sometimes hurts. The sifting isn't always smooth. Are you willing to keep going through that process in faith? Are you like Ruth? Are you willing to go and have the long conversation, knowing that it's going to lead towards maturation? Even though you might need to have that conversation in faith, and it might go hardly, like poorly, however I'm supposed to say that. May go poorly. Are you still willing to step in because you know you'll grow from it? Maybe there's been some conversations you know you've needed to have, but you haven't been willing to have. Are you willing to have them? Are you willing to get dirty on the threshing floor to come out on the other side better? So her step of faith, she was met by God in it, because Boaz sought to protect her even in that. She had a lot to lose, more than him in this. But God worked in a very direct way in bringing about her story of redemption. So will you trust God in faith for redemption? Will you give over those cares to him? Look to him. Church, that's a response that we can have today. And we can learn that from the story. And we can see how Jesus is the redeemer of our stories. That in that threshing floor moments, the redeemer who lived a perfect and sinless life, he came to provide for you. He died on the cross to atone for your sins. He got up out of the grave to put a stamp on the redemptive work that he is doing. So you can keep going to the threshing floor year after year, going through the sifting, going through that work, trusting not yourself to get yourself together, but trusting Jesus in faith that he can work in your life. That's why you keep coming. For some, maybe you feel tired because you've been trying to work it out yourself. But in the same way that Ruth had a kinsman redeemer, we have the chief redeemer in Jesus. So we look to him in faith as a redeemer of our stories. That same good news that saves us through grace is that same good news that we turn to every day when we need grace. So keep looking to Jesus, church.